Welcome back. It's now 20 minutes to 9 p.m. and time for the Car Talk segment, part number 2. Right. So tonight we're talking to Adam Ford, and we're going to be discussing, with regards to repossession of cars and how you can avoid having your car being repossessed. Car repossessions, they are obviously rising after the lockdown. And here's how you can stop, obviously, having your car being repossessed, right? We're going to dissect this a bit more. A lot of people have obviously been through this whole pandemic, and we are going through it. And let's obviously, look at ways in which we can, better our lives, maybe budget a bit more, prepare a bit more, how not to find yourself in that situation. If you have found yourself in that situation, interact with me. Send through your comments below. Or you can WhatsApp us on 061-766-0355. To our viewers and listeners out on the various platforms on Facebook, YouTube, I acknowledge all of you guys. Man, I appreciate the love. It's all good. Adam Ford is joining me tonight, and we're discussing repossessions of motor vehicles and the trends around this currently right now. Adam Ford, motoring journalist, good evening. Welcome once again to the program.
Good evening, and thank you for having me once again.
Awesome stuff. Great to have you with us, man. Thanks for taking the time. Now, car repossessions obviously are up to pre-lockdown levels, which is quite shocking. And we know there are ways to obviously avoid your car being repossessed, but what are some of this reasons we're seeing some of this? Yes, we know people have lost their jobs. Some people are unemployed. Some people obviously, cannot live up to their payments, etc. And the banks are obviously being strict. And, when it comes to obviously the NCRX, etc., there's a lot of stringent measures that have been put in place, I guess, post-lockdown. And we've seen acts and bills passed during the lockdown last year, right, in this regard, which might have changed the motoring industry as we know. For example, maybe, certain amendment bills, whatever the case may be. Now, when it comes to lenders who will help you sell a car you can't afford anymore, and you may be able to, for example, save on costs, right? By giving back the car rather than having it taken away. What do you do in that kind of instance? Firstly, and then also I want to discuss the rise in the car repossessions that we've seen and the stats, that we've seen over the last few months, if we may.
Yeah, look, obviously it's not a great situation to have your car repossessed. You're not in a great position, but with the economy the way it is, the unemployment situation, and of course a lot of people losing jobs or taking a cut in salary, maybe they're in an unfortunate position where along comes your finance house and you haven't paid for the vehicle and they're coming to repossess it. Now, obviously there's a couple of things that one can do to try and prevent the car being repossessed in the first place. And the first thing to do, which of course, is when you realize that you're getting into trouble, don't go and try and hide the car away and think, well, I'm going to hide it and the bank's not going to find it. They're going to find it. You're responsible for it. So the first thing to do is to go along to the bank that's involved here and say to them, listen, in the next month or so, I'm going to have trouble paying my car. What can we do to try and prevent this? Let's talk to the bank. Often what will happen is, if for argument's sake, you've got a vehicle on a 5-year, 60-month finance package, maybe you've only got 30 months left, and they may say, look, what we'll do is we'll extend it to 72 months, which they can do, which means your payment will come down a little bit. Maybe that can, you can afford that to try and prevent it being repossessed.
Okay.
There are things that the bank will do to try and help you, because, in all fairness, the bank doesn't want your car. It's a real pain in the butt for them to come and repossess the car and store it, and then have to go through the process of auctioning the vehicle off. So they're always, they would rather you make some sort of payment. Maybe things will improve over the next couple of months and you can catch up with the payments. The first thing, of course, speak to the bank.
Now, having said speak to the bank, right? Maybe people are, and I'd like the viewers to interact with us as well. I see many of you obviously viewing right now. Comment. Have you financed a vehicle? Are you going through a problem? Maybe somebody in your family, your neighbor, whoever. Adam, let's say we approach the bank, right? Are they actually showing a bit of leniency during this lockdown? Because we've seen the banks take a knock. We've seen major industries take a knock, be it the banking sector, be it landbouw with the whole agricultural thing, be it mining. But are we seeing a bit of leniency from your big five like Capitec, ABSA, Standard Bank, Bankfin, MFC, whatever the case may be? Are they showing a bit of leniency? Because I remember post 2010, they were very, strict when it came to adhering to payments and repossessing the vehicles. However, now, as you mentioned, the bank don't want your car because it's a pain in the butt for them. Are they willing to obviously meet you halfway or curate the kind of thing, litigation? Is there some sort of balance that we can find in this regard?
Well, I think it varies from case to case. Now, if you get into a situation where you have not paid a penny to the bank for the last 6 months, they're not exactly going to be trying to help you out. They're not going to be lenient. They're going to come and take the vehicle and they're going to repossess it. They're going to auction it, which is I don't think people understand the problem involved here. Just to quickly reiterate the fact that, let's say, for argument's sake, you owe your bank 300,000 Rand, as an example. And you can't pay it, and the bank come and repossess your car, and they put it on auction in 6 months' time, and they sell it for 100,000 Rand. You are still liable for that 200,000 Rand, the outstanding amount. They will still come after you for that. If you haven't got the money, they can't get it out of you. You're going to have a bad credit rating, and you can waive getting any finance for anything basically for many, many, many years to come. So like I said before, if you are getting into trouble, speak to the bank. You may find that they're going to say to you, okay, we'll give you a leniency for a couple of months. There are ways around it, but best thing to do is to speak to the bank first, because you don't want to get in that situation. How lenient they'll be, I suppose that varies from bank to bank, and it depends on the circumstances you're in.
Or maybe the consultant's mood, whoever you're speaking to, in that particular regard.
If you can't clear the debt on your car, the best thing to do as well is try and find somebody who can clear the debt on your car. So maybe you can take it to a car dealer and they can offer you, they can settle the bank for you, which means at least you're not going to get any sort of blacklisting, and you won't get a bad credit rating. So if you can find somebody that can buy the car and settle the outstanding amount to the bank, that is first prize. So you're going to struggle without a car for a while, but that's a hell of a lot better than having a bad credit rating, because when circumstances improve and you can afford another vehicle, more than likely you're going to need that finance, and then you're not going to get that finance. So if you can extend it with the bank, first prize. Of course, if you can sell it and clear your debt, that's also going to be an amazing help to you.
Now, in the intro to the interview, we mentioned that the rate of repossessions of cars in South Africa and by the major banks is generally back to where it was, prior to the lockdown, and which started obviously in March, right? Now, it's likely to climb. However, industry experts are saying that the end of relief measure, and this is what I want to highlight here from certain banks, for people who are struggling, as we mentioned earlier, there's a recession that's expected, right? But ABSA, Standard Bank, and Nedbank have reported that car loan carriers and the car loan arrears and impairments are obviously rising. And I'm looking at some of the stats which they've released, right? Standard Bank's car repossession rate is what I understand correctly. And obviously this is from Los Lindstrom, who are saying that their rates have increased from 0.25% to 0.32% of the value of the bank's total car loan book. It might look like a small percentage, but in numbers, you and I know it's massive, right? Now,
that's a portion around 1,200 cars a month, something like that.
Exactly. I mean, and on average, let's take about 150K per car minimum on average, Then again comes Nedbank, which provides 106 billion rands in finance for about 670,000 cars. And I mean, they were repossessing 1,200 cars per month before the national lockdown started. So now, obviously, we're seeing a major impact that obviously the big banks are experiencing. So what about now moving forward now, how to avoid our cars being repossessed now? Let's say, for example, you got a good credit history, everything's in check. Maybe you haven't missed a loan payment, for example, right? But you're worried about keeping up with some of the payments now. Like you said, speak to the bank and your lender about extending the duration of your monthly payment. However, what else can we do? Can we give back your car to the lender, perhaps?
Well, you can. You can just say, take my car back, but you're going to be stuck with the debt. that means, like I mentioned earlier on, that means the car's going to go to an auction. It's going to get sold at some stage. It's going to be sold for less than you most probably owe on the vehicle. And you're going to get a very bad credit rating, which is, later on in life, you're going to regret. So it's always best to try and resolve this problem amicably.
And I was looking at what Debt Busters was saying, right? Debt Busters on the net, and they were saying they called voluntary repossession, right? This terminology. Now, some of the viewers and listeners might be wondering, okay, what exactly are they saying? Voluntary repossess? I mean, who in their right mind will do such a thing? But it's best to talk to your bank when you're in trouble, like you mentioned, right? But now MFC, they obviously said that you can restructure, is what you've mentioned. What are some of the other alternative payment arrangements or things that we can do? Because obviously many people right now are having problems, and our hearts are with them. Those of us who are fortunate enough to have, well, obviously, Alhamdulillah, the Almighty, glory be to God. He is how He has praised Himself. He is, the provider. However, there are many people who are in, circumstances where they can't get themselves out of. It's just unforeseen and it's sad. What do they do? Let's say the bank don't want to listen to you now and you got no means of finance. I mean, do you then go and sell the car privately and then just try and get your money back and give it back to the bank? I mean, people are going to resort to desperate measures. I mean, you mentioned earlier you can't go and hide the car. I mean, we are human beings. People might resort to a desperate measure. What do you do then?
Well, the most important thing I would think is to talk to the bank first, because eventually this problem is going to come. Eventually they're going to come and take the car. You can talk to debt counseling. Obviously, debt counseling will give you advice on where to go as well. But it all boils down to how much is still outstanding to the bank. If you can sell the vehicle and clear that debt, that's also fantastic. But unfortunately, if you cannot pay, they're going to come for your car eventually. It's going to happen. So
now, you mentioned debt counseling, and I saw a post on Facebook somebody shared. It was on one of the motor car groups for Johannesburg or whatever the case may be, where they entered into a debt arrangement or debt, whatever the case is, this debt counsel thing where they try and assist your debt. And I think it's like cumulatively bring your debt together and help you make a payment at the end of the month kind of thing. But then there was a scam. So how not to be scammed in this regard? I mean, maybe you might not be an expert in finance, but I'm just asking.
There's so many scam artists out there. You have to be really, really careful.
When it comes to this debt counseling thing, yeah.
Well, so I suppose when it comes to debt counseling, you need to find reputable companies. How do you do that? I suppose the internet is an amazing place nowadays, and you can go and research it and find somebody that is a good debt counselor. It'll help a little bit, but when you're getting to that stage, there are obviously difficult situations that you'll be in, and unfortunately, there's no way out of it besides paying for the car or giving it back, and then sitting with the consequences afterwards, which is not nice. And I suppose it all really gets down to making sure when you buy vehicles as well, to really buy with something that you can afford. Buy with your brain and not your heart.
Exactly. And I mean, people do buy with their hearts nowadays. I mean, I want to talk about something next week, hopefully with you on our next motoring segment, about another vehicle I've seen, the new GM's, the GWC off-road, whatever the case may be, the P series, but that's for another day. That's for another day. However, you've been in the industry for many years and as a motoring journalist, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see South Africa right now in terms of motor finance and our motoring industry right now? The trends are, look, it's very hard to predict, right? We're living in uncertain times. We could go back to level 5 or we could drop to level 1 after winter. But let's say for the next quarter, as a journalist, right? Where do you see finance in this country, and where do you see the buying trends now moving and shifting towards? Because I'm seeing a lot of cars on the roads, like your Polo Vivos, your Hyundai i20s, 1-liter turbos. You're seeing a lot of Buckies, but you're no longer seeing so many of the high-end bespoke vehicles as what we were seeing before every day, like your M series and your S classes. what are some of the trends that you've noticed, and what do you think we can see moving forward for the next quarter of the year, let's say?
Well, I think there's a big movement into downsizing cars. So where people would buy, for argument's sake, 3 Series BMW, they look at the price now and it's 7, 8, 900,000 rand. They can't afford it, so they move down to something that's a little bit more affordable in the sort of 3 to 4, 500,000 rand bracket. And you notice the growth in small SUVs.
Yes.
That's where the big growth is. So if you look at cars like Toyota Urban Cruiser, Honda
Suzuki's,
WRC, all those kinds of cars, the Suzuki Brezza, Kia just brought out the new Sonnet. Hyundai's got there's a new Kona coming out. There's
yes,
Creta, all these kinds of small SUVs that people are getting to. And if you look at the technology in those vehicles and you look at the features that you get in those vehicles, they are better than the fancy premium brands had 5 years ago. So
but what about durability? Because obviously we know Hilux, Ranger, Navara, hardbody, etc. Those were, built tough. I don't want to use the word Ford tough, but anyway.
Not so much. Yeah.
No, I know. I don't want to get into the Amarok story, and let's not even go there yet. But we're seeing the trends going into smaller cars. Does this also bring about, something in your mind that, people are now not worried about street credibility when it comes to like buying a car? Oh no, look at me, I've got now the Oettinger Golf 7R, or I've got now, A45 AMG with the Akrapovic pipe. I'm now just my humble whatever. And with no disregard to anybody driving any of these mentioned vehicles, I'm just saying some of the trends we're seeing among civil society and consumers alike.
Look, obviously there are people that still go out and spend too much money on cars, in my opinion. They really do. But the masses are moving to affordable cars. A really good example is take Haval. Chinese brands have never ever done well here. All of a sudden, Haval come along. They bring us good products at affordable pricing with lots of features and cool looking cars. They're not. I mean, if you look at the new Haval H6 as an example, and the Jolion, two really good, well-spec cars that are most probably, 100,000 rand less than their competitors.
But now I want to ask a question here, right?
Yes.
I mean, we saw General Motors, come 2005 to 2015, they brought out their Chevs and they brought out their Trailblazers and the Avios, and then they pulled up with Opel. Right, Opel might be around, but now for the next 10 years, whatever the case may be. I'm talking about after service here when it comes to Haval, as opposed to what GM. After service was a problem, I think, with General Motors. How's Haval's as opposed to, General Motors were and are supposed to be a conglomerate in the motoring industry,
Yeah. Look, from my feedback that I hear from Haval owners, majority of them are very happy with the service they're getting and the backup they're getting for the vehicles. But remember, the vehicles are still relatively new. So we'll see what happens when they become 6, 7 years old and 200,000 kilometers on them. What's the backup like then? Are you going to be able to get spare parts for them? Are their retail values going to be good? At present time, they're doing wonderful things. And all kudos to them. If you're bringing out a good brand like that and you backing it, I wish you all the best. Do well and sell lots of cars. And you mentioned GM. That's a great example, because at the moment, anybody that owns a GM car is, and you need spares for it. It's a real
I actually do know people who own GM cars, and I actually had a discussion with a buddy of mine. That's why I'm asking and I'm raising the point. Not to marginalize any brand or buyers, but to be, in general. People might be having a GM car, whatever it may be. They're sitting with a Chef Trailblazer or maybe with a Bucky, whatever. They're sitting with a problem with parts. But anyway, that brings us to 9 p.m. on the dot. Adam, it's always a pleasure talking to you, my man.
But come to an end quickly.
I know it's just unfortunate we can go on, but anyway, you ignite the ignition on your side as you always do.
Thank you very much.
Love it, my man. Awesome stuff. Adam Ford, great having you with us, and we'll chat again soon. Have an awesome evening. Stay safe and enjoy your weekend.
Lovely. Same to everybody out there.
Cheers, man. Ciao. It's Adam Ford, motoring journalist, talking to us tonight about how not to get your car repossessed. And also, we're just touching a bit about debt counseling when it comes to motor vehicle financing and, the scams that are happening out there. And also, the motoring trends that we've seen, where if you are finding yourself in a financial problem, guys, approach your bank. Netbank's Motor Finance Corporation, MFC, have said, if you're running into trouble with your car payment, okay, you can also apply to restructure your loan with them. So go there, approach them. Let's not sit back, be complacent. Inshallah, we make dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps everybody in their situations, whatever condition or situation they may be in. But yeah, it's my situation now to leave the building. It's 9 p.m. on the dot. Time for me to wrap up the program. It's been great hosting you guys. I see all of you on Facebook, on YouTube, on the social media platforms. We appreciate the love, guys. It's been so great. It's been fantastic. Until next time, take care. Have an awesome weekend. Remember myself in your du'as. Remember those who are less fortunate. Make dua to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us istiqamat and steadfastness, inshallah, in what we do. And we do it only for the pleasure of our Creator. Having said that, have an awesome weekend, guys. Assalamu alaikum. Take care. Be safe and keep well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.